Hello everyone, how are you doing? I hope that you are doing so very well. Today I am here with a review of a book and an app. I'll be reviewing the audiobooks.com app as well as The Bird and the Sword by Amy Harmon, which is a book that they sent me to listen to. This video is being sponsored by audiobooks.com, gotta be upfront with y'all, so here we go. First I'm going to talk about the audiobooks app. It's booting up right now. I had some audiobooks from them already. This is where I listened to the Raven Boys, bless it. And here's the book that they sent me right there, also Little Women. I don't really know why, but it's there. This app is really easy to navigate. It's really easy to find stuff. You can browse for more books, look at your notes on different books, and it has all the main things that I want from an audiobook app. It has a sleep timer. It's got a 30-second forward-backward button. I didn't have any bugs or problems when I was using it. Like when I use Hoopla to listen to audiobooks, sometimes it'll just like shut down randomly, but I had absolutely no problems keeping my place or anything with the audiobooks app. The only things that I wish that they had was a chapter function where you could skip to different chapters if you were reading the physical book alongside it, and a % done function, like whenever you bookmark something maybe you could see the %, but I don't really think a lot of places have that, and I just would like to see a lot more of that because it helps me whenever I'm updating my Goodreads status. And I also know that they were the ones who did the audiobook for The Bird and the Sword by Amy Harmon, and oh my gosh, it's so good. So I'm really interested to listen to more audiobooks by audiobooks.com because this one was so good, and it maybe set my standards a little bit too high. Now moving on to the review of The Bird and the Sword. First I'm going to talk about non-spoilers, then I'm going to talk about spoilers as per usual. The Bird and the Sword is about a girl named Lark who lives in this world where there are gifted people, and the gifted in this world are hunted and killed. When Lark is younger, her mom is teaching her how to use her magic, and through a series of circumstances, the king finds out publicly that her mom is a gifted person, and he kills her in front of Lark. While her mom's dying, she tells her to lock her words away and to not use them, which means from that point forward, Lark can't speak. Then the book skips to when Lark is 21, she's kind of going about her life, doing her thing, and then kind of as a political move, the new king, who is the son of the king who killed her mom, takes her away, takes her back to the palace in kind of a power move over her dad. The whole book is basically her learning who she is, growing in her abilities, and her learning to let people in and build relationships with people around her. I loved this book so much more than I was expecting to. Overall, I really like fantasy. There's not a ton of fantasy that I really don't like. Fallen Kingdoms. I don't know what I was expecting from this book, but it definitely wasn't this, and I didn't expect it to move me as much as it did. The world building was fantastic. The magic system especially was so great. It was a very simple idea that could be built upon and could be made more complex, but it was so simple to understand. Like at the beginning, there's a bit of what I guess I would call info dumping, where the author is kind of laying out the magic system, but it doesn't feel like info dumping because it's like 1 or 2 paragraphs of information. There are the 4 different main kinds of magic, but there's branches of those different things. Like there are tellers and there are changers, but there's different veins of those specific magics. It can be built upon and be made more complex, but it's not super complex or hard to understand. It was also fun to see different creatures like trolls. There's a troll who is Lark's basically guardian, and he was really the only magical creature that I saw in the book, but they talked about how there were others in the world and they were around, so that was really fun. As for scenes and like picturing the world, outside of the magic system and world building, it was like I liked this and then I didn't like this. There were scenes that were really vivid and really easy to picture and really easy to see in my mind's eye, and then others that kind of fell flat and I was like, I don't know what it is, but I like the content of the scene, but I can't really picture it. The writing in this book was super beautiful and super well done. The author voice was wonderful. I loved everything about the writing. There was a good mix of dialogue and action. It wasn't like really heavy one way or the other. It was split very nicely, and I know I already mentioned the narrator, but she was so freaking good. I looked up a little bit about her, and what she's done before is anime. She really could convey a lot of emotion with her voice without being overbearing. She was such a good narrator. So good. The plot I overall enjoyed. It could have been a little bit more cohesive. The plot didn't have a real flow or direction. There was kind of a main overarching goal, but it wasn't super clear, and I was like, I still really liked what happened, different scenes that happened, the relationship building, especially in this book, I loved, and there was a lot of exciting points in the plot. It just didn't feel like it went together very well. The antagonist in this book, I'm really not going to say much about because lots of spoilers, but the antagonist fell a little flat for me. Wasn't really super well developed, kind of felt like it came out of nowhere, so I think early on in the book I was like, this feels like a mix of Beauty and the Beast and The Little Mermaid, because Lark can't speak, and when she goes to the palace at first she doesn't know how to read or write, so she really doesn't have a lot of ways to communicate besides just making symbols and pointing at things. And then we've got a Beauty and the Beast vibe going on because this prince takes her away and basically like locks her in a tower and is like, you have to stay with me. There were also quite a few battles in this book, and even battles that were like talked about ahead of time and were like kind of planned out still still felt really sudden to me. I guess that is more of a pacing issue. It just was like, oh, okay, like we're here, we're doing this thing. I don't really understand what the point of this is, but we're doing it. I still liked the battle scenes. They just kind of felt a little out of place. I don't really know how to describe it, but that's just how I felt. I really, really loved the characters a lot. I really loved Lark. She was so great. And I enjoyed reading about the king. His name is Tyrus and he is great. Though sometimes I was really annoyed at Tyrus because he just kind of felt like the typical alpha male a lot of times. And I was like, not really here for this. Then he would be like really nice later. Just kind of went back and forth and back and forth. And that's all I've got for the non-spoilery section. Closing thoughts are that I liked this book a lot more than I was expecting to. I had some issues with it, but I still really, really liked it. So I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Again, you can like some stuff, have some issues with it, and still give it a high rating. Things you can do. So if you haven't read this book, I hope that makes you want to read it because you should. And if you can, listen to the audiobook because it's so good. Bye, bye, bye. I'll see you when you've read this book. You can come back and watch the spoilery section. Ho ho ho. And we're back. Time to talk about the spoilers. Back to characters. I freaking love Lark. She was so BA. She was so cool and so wonderful. And when she started coming into her powers later in the book, it was incredible. It was so cool to watch. Part of me was like, why do you have so much power? Why are you the most powerful person freaking ever? And the other part of me was like, shh. She's so great. She's so wonderful. And I loved her so much. I loved that she was sassy and bold and not afraid to speak her mind and not afraid to say, I don't want to be manhandled. Excuse you, stop. Going more in depth on the Tyrus stuff, I liked Tyrus, but a lot of things he did to Lark and like for Lark just felt a little off to me. The whole relationship had a huge power balance issue because she was essentially his captive. She was a lady of the court, but she was his captive and he was the king, and then they had a relationship and it just made me really uncomfortable. Another thing that made me uncomfortable was like it wasn't super typical how the romance played out because there was that telepathy stuff going on and Tyrus could feel what she was feeling about him even if she was saying something different, and he didn't always respect that. So I was like, ugh. Normally in a book there's somebody that's fighting their feelings and they're like, no, I don't want this. This isn't good. This is not a good idea. And then they give in. But this was like the total opposite of that because he was like, I know that you like me because I can feel it. I can hear it from you. And she was still fighting it. That was my main issue with it, that I didn't like how he would just kind of force his way into that, even if she was like, no. But he was like, your mind is saying something different. And I'm like, you still need to respect the words someone is saying, okay? But later in the book, he got a lot better, especially after they got married, which was definitely consensual. He was just so patient with her and teaching her how to be queen because he was turning into a bird and he didn't know how long it was gonna last. The wait for him scene, I was dying. I was gonna cry in public. It was fine. When she just waited for him for hours and hours and she waited. It's so emotional. There were so many scenes that made me cry and made me really emotional, and I'm like thinking about them now and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna cry. It's fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. But yeah, conflicting feelings. Overall good, but still some really big issues. Now back to plot. I had some issues with plot, mostly with the villain, aka Lord of the Volgar, aka Tyrus's dad that I can't remember his name. That just felt really out of place and sudden. So did Ariel of Fieri, I think that's how you say it. Her and him working together and like how that all came about at the end just didn't make sense, and it didn't really work super well. There wasn't a lot of emotional connection beyond the fact that he killed her mother. That was her only like real emotional connection with him, but there was no sort of other build up with that. I really liked that Kel was Tyrus's brother, but it just was like, oh, okay, whatever. I guess it helps the plot a little bit. It just felt like a detail that was thrown in there to be like, this is only for plot purposes. There's really no other reason, and it's only for like one specific thing. The ending and like the emotional reveal or whatever just wasn't set up very well. I really liked the battle scenes because they didn't really shy away from war. They didn't go into a ton of gruesome details, but it wasn't like, war is great, everyone's fine, people don't die. They still talked a lot about death, and Lark talked a lot about how she was feeling about it, and she was just feeling so heartbroken. Even when she was having the Volgar kill themselves, she was feeling so heartbroken about it. Seeing that empathetic personality in someone was so great. I loved that so much. I could go on and on about just different scenes, but for sake of time, I will not. There were a lot of scenes that just made me so emotional and just like, oh, Lark, I love you so much. Lark and Tyrus, so many things. Especially when he freaking flew away to just like accept that he was a bird. I was dying. I was just like, I'm gonna die. And then the whole thing where she had given him a word, I also feel like there wasn't a lot of setup for that, but that was still a really cool element, that she was the reason that he was turning into a bird, and then she was able to save him, and it was so great. Lark was freaking the best, and I love her. A few final thoughts on world building, because there's not a lot of spoilery things with that. I really loved that Tyrus was a changer. I love seeing that Lark's mom was a teller, and so is she, but they had different versions of their power, and then whenever they met all of the gifted people and were like, please help us, it was so great. And so how the gifted and all the normal people all came together at the end. It was so wonderful. Everybody coming together. It's the best. And as for my final thoughts, I really loved this book so much. Obviously, when I was talking about it, I had some issues, but like overall, it was just so good and so much better than I was expecting, and I'm really glad the audiobooks.com contacted me about this video because I don't think I would have read this book otherwise. The characters were just great. The magic system was so cool. It made me really emotional all the time. I cried in public a couple times, maybe, probably, yeah. I loved it a lot, a lot, a lot. Let me know down below what your favorite scene in this book or anything you think about this book. Make sure to do the thing where you do spoiler, enter, and then write the spoilers. So it gives you a read more tag and people don't see the spoilers that haven't read the book. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.